y'all, and welcome back to another episode of Thursday Thoughts. I am here after 2 weekend recaps to give y'all a break for a little bit because y'all have seen a lot of weekend recap of my summer break, but we are going to balance that out with Tuesday Talk and Thursday Thoughts and Couch Conversations episodes, coming up this month, along with other special occasion vlogs. So today's vlog is just kind of like about the first half of 2023. I normally don't do like mid-year recaps, but this year has been unbelievably weird and we need a debrief. So the first half of 2023, my God, I am just glad that I've made it this far in 2023, because had I had it my way, oh baby, there would have been no way I would still be here. And I mean that honestly. It should have been another way, and that's as far as I'm gonna take it with that. I mean, I seriously cannot believe that it is July. Like, we just got to 2023. So walking into this year, nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me to watch Pop Pop get sick all over again and then be hit with a loss at the beginning of the fourth quarter of sophomore season and at the end of the school year, which was such a very weird time. We were fully aware that 2023 was going to be the year, but we just didn't know which month it was going to happen. And so some days I feel like when I wake up, I feel like I'm still in March because life has happened so fast that my world just stopped. But I'm also trying to catch up with life that has happened in a sense. And so there's days where I feel like out of place a little bit because it's just like sometimes things just don't feel right. I was literally catapulted into the new chapter of no grandparents while being occupied with academics. And that was definitely a journey. And life is so weird because things make sense and they don't at the same time. And it's only been like 3.5 months of this new chapter, and it's weird. January, Pop Pop got really sick on New Year's Day, actually. Literally the first day of this year, he was like sick. That whole weekend was literally perfect, and we get to Sunday. Church was amazing. I remember House of Hope Atlanta service was incredible, and then we get to the end of the day, and Pop Pop is just completely out of it. And I remember being like, this cannot be happening. Like on the first day of 2023, this is not happening. And then he started hallucinating, and I promise you, I freaked out because I really thought that Pop Pop was going to forget who I was. January felt like an extension of 2022. It felt like the 13th month of the year. It did not feel like 2023 until February. I feel like February was like that little break in chaos, just a little bit because of Valentine's Day. I always look forward to Valentine's Day. That is one of my favorite holidays, and I feel like the excitement of that shielded me from most of my worry and concern for Pop Pop. And Pop Pop was like sick off and on, and there were even several weeks where Pop Pop was fine and nothing was wrong, and I almost fell for it. Like, okay, nothing's wrong with Pop Pop, so maybe he'll be okay. And then I had to keep reminding myself, like, I need to enjoy these moments and the time that I have with him because he's gonna go right back to feeling sick again. I am so happy that I got to spend Valentine's Day with him. That was our last holiday together, and I'm very grateful that we had that time. And I gave him a card and some chocolate, and just everything in that moment seemed so perfect. And y'all got to see the Valentine's Day edition of Weekend Recap, and that was absolutely amazing. March literally came in like a flood, and great Jesus, it was so fast. Like every week felt like a new year. It started on top and then got progressively worse. The first week of March y'all saw because I did a first week of March weekend recap, and that was a great week. And then y'all also came along for spring break, and that was also incredible. And I spent a lot of time with Pop Pop off camera, and I'm very grateful for that because I did not know that those would be some of the last times that I would be spending with him. And it was just definitely some great times that were had in those last moments. I remember when Pop had a cardiologist appointment early in that month, and it really shook me. And his cardiologist said that there was a very, 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 very high chance of sudden death. And my anxiety multiplied. Like, I was like, okay, this is serious. Like, Pop Pop is going to die. And I knew that things were bad. I always knew that. You know, I always knew that Pop Pop had things going on with him since I've been born. But that appointment just, it was a kind of bad that just exceeded my definition of bad. And I remember my dad kept telling me, he was like, you know, your Pop Pop's on his last leg. Like, he is about to be out of here. And my dad also said, like, I don't know how much your Pop Pop can handle. And so that following week after spring break, on March 22nd, he passed away, and he literally had sudden death. Like, he just went to sleep and literally slept off to heaven, literally. I still cannot get that day out of my head. Like, I remember waking up and getting a text early that morning from my mom, and she was like, Dad and I are at Pop Pop's house. And I had the worst anxiety because I was like, oh no, is Pop Pop okay? Like, I was so nervous, but at that moment, death really didn't cross my mind. So mom gets home and walks in my room, and she sits on my bed and she doesn't say anything. And before I could even ask about Pop Pop, she says, I'll be right back. And so she goes to the bathroom. And so, you know, by this point in time, I'm up and stuff and getting ready in an attempt to go to school and go on a field trip that day, because I was actually supposed to go on a field trip. So mom's in the bathroom. I go to my bathroom and, you know, plug in my flat iron, and mom comes in my bathroom and she's at the door and she says, I have something to tell you. And I look at her face and she has tears in her eyes, and I just knew. And she said, Pop Pop's gone. Pop Pop went to sleep and he didn't come back. The paramedics were called and they tried to do everything, but your Pop Pop was already gone. You know, I'm just standing there in a mix of disbelief, but like also at the same time, I just knew everything was about to go left when mom told me, I have something to tell you. And so I'm just standing there staring at her like I'm literally just overcome with all of these intrusive thoughts. First, confused as to how it just happened so fast. And then my heart started pounding. Like, I can't even describe it. I was thinking a million things at the same time. I had a headache. And so mom shuts the bathroom door and walks out to let me finish straightening my hair so that we could go be with dad at Pop Pop's house. And I stood there with my arms folded and staring at the wall, like whispering to myself, what? Then we had to make the announcement to family and friends and then to the public. And I told my friends, and it was just unreal. I looked at the Facebook post that, you know, we had posted for Pop Pop, and I was just like, we seriously just posted a death announcement. Like, that was unbelievable to me. We spent almost like half the day at Pop Pop's house. We just spent the morning there together, and we were all kind of in the corners of the living room, and it was very quiet. I was very speechless. I had never heard Pop Pop's house so quiet. Like, I just felt like I was waiting on him to call my name and come back there. And it was just weird that all of that was gone. Because I was Pop Pop's only grandchild, my parents were very adamant about making sure that I had a say in plans as far as arrangements as well. My parents and I collectively wanted to make sure that we sent Pop Pop off right. And we knew, like, okay, this is the one chance that we have. And so we had every intention to make it a genuine celebration of life, and that is exactly what it was. And once the programs had came in for the funeral, I looked at it and I was like, I should not be holding this program right now. Coming into April was Pop Pop's funeral and burial, and we definitely sent Pop Pop off right. And it was just perfect. It was literally a movie. Like, my dad sang songs from Pop Pop and Grandma's singing group that they led before they started our church. Like, original songs that no one else has written or heard of besides like our church and people that would come to their singing events and different things like that. And of course, my dad was also the perfect one to preach the eulogy. I mean, just as the son, like, it just made sense. And because he knew Pop Pop better than anyone else did, besides my mom and I. Watching my dad stand on that stage at Pop Pop's funeral was just like reliving Grandma's funeral all over again, because, you know, he preached at both of their funerals. And so seeing my dad cry literally broke me in half, and it wrecked me so bad. I actually didn't include this in Pop Pop's edition of Weekend Recap. which I showed the weekend of, the funeral and events and behind the scenes surrounding that. But I actually got to speak at the funeral, and it was very emotional when I got up there because it hit me all over again in that moment. Like, wow, this is my Poppy's funeral. And then the service had ended and the funeral directors came and they took Pop Pop's casket to the car, and watching my godbrothers put Pop Pop, their godfather, in that car was so sad. Like, they put him in there and shut the door, and then they just drove off with my Pop Pop. And I'm standing there as they're driving off, and I'm like, no, like, come back. Like, that's my Pop Pop. So that whole weekend was literally a blur. And then that Tuesday after his funeral was the burial. And I'm very, very grateful that we did not bury him on the same day that we had the funeral, because I just felt like in my heart I wasn't ready for all of that to happen in one day. The burial was more so a private thing, and before they lowered Pop Pop, into the ground, we had one last moment together, and that really wrecked me. Like, everything with Pop Pop's funeral and burial, I felt like I was reliving for Grandma's funeral and burial and everything. Just the weight of both of those losses together just weighed so heavy on me in that moment, and it still does sometimes. After the ceremonial stuff and military honors for Pop Pop, my dad asked me if I wanted to take a flower with me, and I said yes, and I have it in my room and I look at it every single day. Easter weekend, we went to go see Pop Pop's side of the family, which was literally the weekend after we buried him, and we went to go see my Pop Pop's sister, which is now the last living sibling of my Pop Pop, and so we went to go see her. It had been about 4 years since I had seen her for Grandma's funeral, and so I was very emotional when we went, because like, just seeing some of her characteristics reminded me of Pop Pop. And then we spent time with her children, which are my dad's cousins and my second cousins. I mean, they had a feast for us when we got to that house. Like, it was just amazing. We had such a great time talking and hanging out together. And when we said goodbye, I was not ready to leave. Like, being with them made me feel so connected to Pop Pop in a way, and just to be in that presence was very, very comforting. And then after that, testing season and the whole school schedule was just through the roof. And then we come over to May. The last month of school was wearing me thin. I was ready to go, okay? I was depressed, stressed, exhausted, and literally just sick of everybody up at that school. I didn't want to hear nobody. I didn't want anybody coming up to me talking about what they were going through. I just wanted to go to school, to test, get my education, and then speed home and cry. And that was literally life. Go to school, come home and cry while doing homework. That's grief and grades at a glance for you. Y'all, once sophomore season ended, I was so relieved. Like, I said goodbye to everybody, and then I went straight home and started packing for our destined getaway, which was that same weekend as the last week of sophomore season. And y'all saw both of those events in weekend recap, which is how we started off our summer break. And then June had like its happiness and heartbreak combined. It was definitely a whirlwind. The first half of June was great. We celebrated my dad's 6th pastoral anniversary, and then the following week I helped out a local church with Vacation Bible School, and that was absolutely amazing to get to be a part of. The first half of June was that, and then the second half of June was a complete blur. Father's Day week was just SMH. Shaking my head, literally. Father's Day without Pop Pop was just weird. That was the first one, and it was good. Like, Father's Day was fine, but I still felt like something was missing, and I knew that it was 100% Pop Pop. And I talked about that during the extended edition of Weekend Recap. And then, you have his birthday and 3-month anniversary of death on the same day, June 22nd. And I was literally an emotional hot mess on that day. I was literally taken over with so many emotions, and y'all got to go along that day with me as well. I walked into my dad's office that morning before we went to the cemetery, and he was like, "How are you doing with everything?" And I just immediately got silent and I started crying. I didn't really know what to say because I was just so sad. So my dad and we talked, and he said, "I know that we've all been handling this in different ways, and I'm new to not having parents, just as you are new to not having grandparents." And then he said, "I'm sorry that I didn't ask you sooner how you were doing." And he just basically made a commitment to be better, and that was really sweet. And I love my dad, and just to see the strength that he has carried in the past 3.5 months has been absolutely remarkable. And so we both kind of just sat there very speechless because this is still all so new. To watch my dad take care of Pop Pop like he did, and then watching my dad hold back tears announcing to everyone that he was gone, and then him planning the most beautiful yet sentimental funeral for Pop Pop, and then to preach at his funeral, and just everything that my dad did for Pop Pop in both life and death was an example of strength and honor that I will admire for the rest of my life. On the day of Pop Pop's birthday / 3-month anniversary of death, we went to the cemetery that day, like I said, and it was very emotional. It was sad and beautiful at the same time, because it was sad of just being reminded of everything, but it was beautiful to know that, you know, my grandparents were buried next to each other and that they get to rest together. And so, you know, although it was sad, I felt a very abundant amount of peace just being with them. And it was like all 5 of us were together in a sense. And that just really brought me peace. Although I was like literally there just crying my eyes out. So after the visit to the cemetery, we went to dinner afterwards, and the waves on the beach were just absolutely gorgeous. And I saw birds, which reminded me of Pop Pop. And then out of nowhere, I saw a butterfly, which reminded me of Grandma. And birds and butterflies are like my symbols for them. And you couldn't tell me that that wasn't Grandma and Grandpa. Like, to me, it was like a sign of them saying, like, we're okay. Then we came into July after that week and had a great 4th of July week. We had a staycation and got to see this year's fireworks from the balcony from our room. And if you tuned into the 4th of July edition of Weekend Recap, then you know all about that. That weekend, I went on a girls trip with my mom and one of my unbiological aunties. We went to Destin, and it was literally so much fun. I'm so glad we went. We were on the 23rd floor, but we had the most gorgeous view. It's been getting better as time has moved on, and then next week we'll begin my trip to Orlando, and we will be there for the rest of the month until August. What has helped me this first half of 2023 is God, first of all. Although this first half has been rocky, God has still proved himself to be faithful, and I have never seen the righteous forsaken. On this life journey, if people sat in the same seat of life as me and they, you know, would have endured what I have in the past 7 to 8 years of my life, they would probably find every reason to be mad at God or blame God. But for me, this loss has shown me another side of God that just makes me love him so much more than I ever have before. I mean, God literally put everything and everybody in place that was meant to be here for this journey, so that when Pop Pop actually did pass away, we were very supported. I mean, supported like crazy, and we still are. And I was like, that is so God. Everyone that's been in my life for this loss has been locked in with me, and we're meant to be here, and their support just means so much to me. It is literally indescribable. As hard as life has been, I must say that summer 2022 was actually worse than this summer. Like, last summer was not a break. It was a hot mess, and there were just some things that happened that were not my fault, but I had to ride the wave of other people's mess, and so it was just like a slap in my face. And I really expected this summer to be a lot worse because of the loss of Pop Pop, but it actually turned out to be a much more pleasant experience. So God is out here doing his thing, and I'm just trying to make sense of it through the emotions that I feel on a daily basis, you know, and doing life a completely different way now. Another thing that has helped me in this second half of 2023 is, of course, House of Hope Atlanta. My goodness, there were weeks where I felt exhausted and heavy, either with anxiety or depression or both at the same time. like how life has been, it felt like a long time from Sunday to Sunday. And then, having Bible study on Wednesdays for midweek, having that right in between with Pastor Smith, it kept me going until Sunday came around again. And I would replay services, especially when Pop Pop was sick and then passed away. And I was in school and just going through life trying to do the best that I could. And so I would replay those services to keep me going. And I still do all the time. That was literally one of the biggest things in just getting through the past 6 months, was listening or watching House of Hope Atlanta all the time. Y'all do not understand that everything about House of Hope Atlanta will get you through when you need to be consoled. Between Pastor Smith singing in random moments of worship, and then the worship team, hearing Mignon Sarton, Greg Kirkland, Jasmine Walton, Lawrence Flowers, and then Darius Polk on lead vocals along with our band. And then just listening to praise and worship and the sermon from Pastor Smith kept me sane in a time where everything that was not normal was happening. The last thing that helped me in the first half of 2023 was my dad. We had a lot of conversations about Pop Pop and what the future would look like for us without him. And we talked about what Pop Pop was going through, and he really strived to be better as a father and step up in his game, because Pop Pop was a very important key male figure in my life. And so when I lost Pop Pop, that was a very hard hit for me and still is. And so my dad has really just tried to be better at not necessarily replacing Pop Pop, but more so being there for me in a more like emotional and mental type of way. And I'm very grateful that my dad respects that role that Pop Pop had in my life, because that is irreplaceable. I know when I was mentioning my dad just now, I said the last thing, but this is actually not the last thing because I have another one. But another thing that's helped me the first half of 2023 is my friends. Like, they just, oh my goodness, like they have seriously blown me away with all of their love and support for me. Like, they've just been really like trying to be there for me in the best way that they possibly can. And, they normally draw from me because I'm like the leader of the pack, the hero, the lifesaver, the saint, the angel, majority of the time. But it's been a weird switch up in the vibe because I've mostly been drawing from them recently. It's because I've just felt so emotionally and mentally unavailable that I feel like I'm not being the friend that I should be. And there'll be certain times where I say certain things and they have to steer me back in the right mindset. They don't ever let me like give up on myself or them. And they have really just become a huge part of my motivation to keep striving to find myself again and be the best version of myself, even in a new chapter of life. And I'm so grateful for that. So that's been my first half of 2023. It has definitely been exhausting, but I am so grateful for this summer just to be on, do not disturb mode and block out the noise. Not having to be on demand and listen to anybody's problems, especially at school, has been very nice because I can just focus on me and my current mental and emotional state. And I definitely put that on hold to finish sophomore season and just get that over with. And so now that sophomore season is over, I can now, I've been taking time to process all of this fast-paced life change stuff. I am so grateful that the first half of this year's over. I really strive this next half of 2023 to, of course, get started with junior year coming up in a couple weeks, and then celebrate my 17th birthday in September, and then the holidays with my parents and other family as well. I cannot end without saying thank you all so much for being here on this journey with me and riding this roller coaster with me for the past 6 months as well. The support has been endless and I am so grateful. I love y'all so much. Have a great weekend.